and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina, and our show is UATV. The Ukrainian government aims to create a so-called state in a smartphone in order to fight corruption by limiting bureaucracy and digitalising the country's economy. The idea was one of Mr Zelensky's presidential election campaign promises. The question is, where is the line between a state in a smartphone and a digital totalitarianism? To discuss this, we welcome to our studio today Vitalii Moroz, digital law expert, program manager of new media at the Internews-Ukraine public organization. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So first of all, let's clear it up for our audience. What is a state in a smartphone initiative?
Generally, it is a broad idea which provides quite legitimate goal to make life of Ukrainians simpler. We are more effective and more comprehensive use of new technologies, get access to public services through digital services. And this idea is in line with technology progress. Ukraine is one of the countries which tries to be modern, and technology have a huge impact on our life. But this idea also have some limitations, because the understanding of technology and its role in our life is undermined, because the issues of cybersecurity, personal data of millions of Ukrainians.
Right, that's what I wanted to ask. Would Ukrainians who comply with the idea of a country in a smartphone, would they have to risk something even more like personal data? And are there risks of human rights violations within this digital miracle, let's say?
We might have great idea, but the most important is implementation.
Exactly.
And implementation of this idea, I would say that Ukraine is not completely ready for comprehensive implementation of this idea, since our institutions and government institutions are quite slow, in fact, and quite conservative. And this idea sounds very revolutionary for Ukraine, but you need to prepare, first of all, institutions, and secondly, population. So with like Ukrainians, many Ukrainians are on the internet. Approximately 70% of Ukrainians are online, but their skills of using the tools are quite different. If we look on the elderly people, they do prefer old mobile phones with no access to internet, because they are quite new to this culture, and this idea appeals to youngsters, in fact, which have digital life, and they spend 24 hours for 7 with their smartphones. So I would say that the key risk is a very fast implementation of idea and trying to impose all services into electronic way. But,
okay, so the country in a smartphone would be a very convenient way to move around the country, let's say, for the young generation of Ukrainians. However, the working staff in the government organizations of Ukraine is mostly elderly people, and they are also the ones who need to be educated properly in order for the country in a smartphone to be implemented. How do we deal with that, first of all?
Since our political leaders are quite young generation, and the Prime Minister who is responsible for digitalization, he's quite young person who brought some innovations to Privatbank, they mainly focus now on innovations and benefits for society, but they don't probably emphasize on the risks and threats. And the key threats, like if Ukraine will develop in the right direction and will be a democracy as it now, citizens should more or less should be confident that their data is not misused. But if the government wants to concentrate all information in huge volumes of all Ukrainians, it can usually misuse. We do know, for example, that when we use our mobile phones, that our personal data, like numbers of our mobile phones, can be sold on the black market. We are not far from China market, and on the China market you can buy for 200 hryvnias the whole huge volume of personal data of Ukrainian users. But more difficult issue is that intelligence and law enforcement are always much more technologically equipped to follow what's going with citizens. So, and I'm talking about more negative scenario. So we have two scenarios, positive and negative.
Wait, so we're talking here right now that there is a huge risk of personal of the theft of the personal information of Ukrainians. However, our law enforcers are ready to cope with that every time. Instead of just eliminating the risk of personal data theft, we're going to be coping with the consequences?
Like our law enforcement, I believe they're transforming, and they have a huge push from civil society, from IT community to understand more and more about technology and how they work. But we have many incidents. For example, a couple of days ago, the Pechersk district court banned 69 websites according to the court decision. And from the point of view of human rights and IT community, it's nonsense, because the decision claims that users have intellectual rights when they browse websites, which is nonsense. So our law enforcement and even the courts, they're not very well educated in understanding the complexity of tech world. Because they always behind civil society and IT community, which participate in international events, which understand much better. So
how do we fill in this gap in order to fully implement the country in a smartphone initiative and make everybody happy?
Bringing all electronic services into smartphone will not make everyone happy, because, for example, there are elderly people who has the right to use offline services, and we shouldn't steal from them this opportunity. In a democratic world, all citizens have the right to choose between very innovative ways to communicate with government, or they're old school methods. What to do with law enforcement? There should be dialogue between stakeholders. I name the word stakeholders because it means all parties which influence on the development of internet or digital sphere, civil society, IT community, and law enforcement. They should come together and cooperate on making all the standards, how we want to develop even this idea. So more and more critical voices are heard on the idea of implementation of this state in smartphone idea. And if the government will be open to provide feedback on these critics, it may improve the suggestions.
Well, hopefully that's going to happen anytime soon, because the initiative itself could be very effective and very fruitful. However, a lot of people just don't understand how it's going to work. Thank you so much for coming here and trying to clarify the situation for us. That was Vitalii Moroz. He's a digital law expert, program manager of new media at the Internews-Ukraine public organization. Stay tuned with UATV for more, and thanks for watching Head to Head. My name is Antonina Androsha.